Hello again. Those following the controversy over the new television series beginning this evening, which features Cleopatra as a black woman, may not fully understand what is going on, nor why those making the programme thought that there was anything odd about portraying a Greek as being black African heritage. It was done quite deliberately. This is not merely ignorance on the part of the producers. It's part of a deliberate and false narrative which has been gaining strength in recent years, both among black people and also white people who wish to display their anti-racist credentials. Essentially, this is part of an alternative history of the world, one in which ancient Egypt, rather than being just one of the civilizations which sprang up in the Fertile Crescent thousands of years before the birth of Christ, is actually the first of these civilizations and was the product of black Africans. Civilization, together with such things as mathematics and literacy, then diffused outward from Egypt into the rest of the Fertile Crescent and then on to ancient Greece. This would mean that what we think of as the great Greek achievements in geometry and other aspects of mathematics are actually derived from black African culture. Literacy itself, that is to say the world's first writing, was also developed in Egypt by Africans, and this too was then acquired by other cultures. Of course, there's not a shred of evidence for all this. Although at one point there were Nubian pharaohs who were certainly black, this happened long after the height of dynastic Egypt. The pyramids, for instance, were built around 2,500 BC, which was roughly 2,000 years before the first Nubian pharaoh. Black influence in Egypt started long after the invention of writing, mathematics and so on. It didn't last all that long anyway. These crank ideas about ancient Egypt having been a black African culture began circulating in the United States over a century ago, but it is since the 1960s that they have become really popular. An entire imaginary history has been carefully constructed, and the casting of Cleopatra as a black person is part of this nonsense. Since the advent of DNA testing, the whole edifice of Afrocentric history has crumbled away completely, at least as far as orthodox science and history are concerned. It's still hugely popular, though, with black people, particularly African Americans. Many white people hesitate to dismiss it as a nonsense it is for fear of appearing racist. It is easy to see how attractive this whole theory has been to a people whose history really consists of little other than slavery and exploitation. The English did the same thing with their own history in medieval times. The fact that we've been conquered by the Romans was written out of history and a new legendary story of England created in which we were the descendants of a Trojan prince. This made good hearing for those whose history had not been very notable up to that point. It is precisely the same pattern as Afrocentrism, a series of fairy tales to make people feel better about themselves. What was discovered when mummies of ancient Egypt were analysed and DNA tested, do you think? In the description to this video, I give a link to a couple of articles which both detail the testing of over 100 mummies, which covered a period in Egyptian history of well over 1,000 years. The DNA showed that these people were related to other groups in the Middle East, the old Fertile Crescent in other words, and also Europe. There was no sub-Saharan DNA at all. These people had no connections with black Africa. They did, however, have connections with Europeans thousands of years BC. Black ancestry did not appear until much later, after the Arab conquest of Egypt, and probably has something to do with the slave trade. In other words, throughout ancient Egypt, the people living in the country were light-skinned, related to the Phoenicians, Hebrews, Syrians, and so on. Modern Egyptians, by contrast, have 15 to 20% of their DNA from sub-Saharan Africa, and this probably has something to do with the black slaves who were transported into the country after the Arab conquest in the 7th century AD. If you look at a lot of modern Egyptians, you can see that they do have black ancestry. President Sadat, who was assassinated in 1981, was notable for looking particularly African, and he had a very offensive nickname in Arabic, which was roughly equivalent to what we now call the N word. I won't say what this nickname was, but it was derogatory and it was based on the fact that he looked particularly black. You see quite a lot of this sort of thing in modern Egypt. This then is the final nail in the coffin of Afrocentrism. The ancient Egyptians, right up to the time that the Arabs conquered their country, were of European and Middle Eastern origin. The idea that this was black African civilization is absurd. It is this foolish notion which is being promoted by film star Will Smith's wife, who is involved in the making of the new series about Cleopatra. And it's not really possible to understand what's going on unless you do know something about the idea of Afrocentrism.